There's something happening inside your head right now that you're completely unaware of. A silent narrator, crafting stories, making assumptions, filling in gaps where reality ends and fiction begins. This narrator has been with you your entire life, whispering interpretations of every moment, every interaction, every outcome. And here's the unsettling truth. Most of what this narrator tells you isn't real. Your mind, the very thing you trust to navigate reality, is constantly lying to you, not maliciously, not with intent to harm, but because it's designed to survive, not to seek truth. It's designed to make sense of chaos, even when there's no sense to be made, and you believe it every single time. Think about the last time someone didn't text you back immediately. What story did your mind create? Maybe they're ignoring you. Maybe you said something wrong. Maybe they don't care about you anymore. Your brain took the simple fact of silence and spun it into an entire narrative about rejection, about your worth, about the state of your relationship. But what if they were just busy? What if their phone died? What if they saw your message and genuinely forgot to respond while dealing with something completely unrelated to you? The mind doesn't wait for facts. It creates them. It fills every void with assumption, every pause with prediction, every unknown with elaborate fiction. And the scary part is how convincing these stories feel. They don't feel like stories at all. They feel like reality. We walk through life believing our thoughts are reporting the truth, when in fact they're constantly editorializing, interpreting, and manufacturing meaning where none exists. Your mind is not a camera recording what happens. It's more like a novelist, taking raw events and weaving them into narratives that feel complete, that feel true, but are often completely fabricated. This isn't some abstract philosophical concept. This is happening to you right now, in this moment, as you process these words. Your mind is already creating a story about what this video means, about whether you agree or disagree, about what it says about you that you're watching it. It's making predictions about where this is going, forming judgments about the information, deciding whether this aligns with what you already believe. But here's what makes this phenomenon so dangerous. We don't just believe these mental stories once and move on. We build our entire lives around them. We make decisions based on fictional narratives our minds have created. We avoid opportunities because our brain has convinced us we'll fail. We sabotage relationships because our thoughts have painted scenarios of inevitable rejection. We limit ourselves because the voice in our head has decided what we're capable of, and we've never questioned whether that voice actually knows what it's talking about. The most successful manipulation isn't done by other people. It's done by your own mind, and the victim and the perpetrator are the same person, you. Your brain evolved not to make you happy, or fulfilled, or successful. It evolved to keep you alive in a world where danger lurked around every corner. In that ancient environment, it was better to assume the rustling bush contained a predator than to wait and find out. Better to overreact than to underreact. Better to see threats that weren't there than to miss threats that were. But we're not living in that world anymore. The rustling bush is now a delayed text message. The potential predator is now a job interview. The life or death situation is now a social interaction. But your brain is still running the same software, still assuming the worst, still creating elaborate threat scenarios out of everyday uncertainty. And here's the cruel irony. The very mechanism that once kept your ancestors alive is now the thing that's keeping you stuck, anxious, and living in a reality that exists primarily in your head. Your mind doesn't just lie about external events. It lies about you. It tells you stories about who you are, what you're capable of, what you deserve. These stories feel so true, so much a part of your identity, that questioning them feels like questioning your very existence. But where did these stories come from? That voice telling you you're not good enough? That's not objective truth speaking. That's a collection of past experiences, societal programming, and random neural firing patterns that your brain has organized into a coherent narrative about your worth. The thought that you'll never be successful, that's not prophecy. That's pattern recognition gone wrong, taking a few data points from your past and extrapolating them into an entire future. Your mind is constantly running simulations, trying to predict what will happen next. But these aren't accurate forecasts. They're anxiety-driven fiction, worst-case scenario planning, masquerading as realistic preparation. How many times have you worried about something that never happened? How many conversations have you rehearsed in your head that bore no resemblance to the actual interaction? How many catastrophes have you lived through mentally that never materialized in reality? Yet each time your mind presents you with these fictional futures, you experience them as if they're real. Your body responds with real stress hormones. Your emotions react with genuine fear, or sadness, or anger. You suffer through events that exist only in your imagination, and that suffering feels completely authentic. This is the mind's most insidious lie. It convinces you that its stories are not stories at all, but direct access to truth. It makes you believe that the voice in your head is you, when in reality, it's just one small part of a much larger system, one component that happens to be very loud and very convincing. But if your mind is constantly lying to you, how do you know what's real? How do you distinguish between actual events and mental fabrication? How do you make decisions when the very instrument you use to process information is fundamentally unreliable? The answer isn't to stop thinking or to distrust every thought that crosses your mind. The answer is to understand how this system works, to recognize the patterns, to catch yourself in the act of believing stories that haven't been verified by reality. Most people live their entire lives never questioning the narrator in their head. They assume that because a thought appeared in their consciousness, it must be true, or at least worth taking seriously. They treat their mental commentary like breaking news, urgent and important, and requiring immediate response. But what if you could step back from that narrator? What if you could hear the story without automatically believing it? What if you could recognize when your mind is filling in gaps with fiction and learn to say, "That's interesting, but let me check if that's actually true"? This isn't about positive thinking or replacing negative thoughts with positive ones. This is about something much more fundamental. This is about recognizing that thoughts are not facts, that your mind's interpretation of events is not the same as the events themselves, that the voice in your head is not an objective reporter, but a subjective storyteller with its own agenda. The stories your mind tells feel so real because they're designed to feel real. They come with emotional weight, with physical sensations, with memories and associations that make them seem grounded in truth. But feeling real and being real are not the same thing. Your mind will tell you that you know what someone else is thinking. It will convince you that you can predict the future based on past patterns. It will create elaborate explanations for why things happen, connecting dots that may not actually be connected. And all of this happens so quickly, so automatically, that you never pause to question whether these mental constructions have any basis in reality. But here's what changes everything. The moment you start to see these patterns, the moment you begin to recognize the difference between what actually happened and what your mind says happened, you begin to reclaim your freedom. You stop being a prisoner of your own thoughts and start becoming their observer. This recognition doesn't happen overnight. Your mind has been practicing these deceptions for your entire life. It's gotten very good at making its stories feel indistinguishable from truth. But once you start to see how the magic trick works, you can never quite unsee it. And that's where real transformation begins, not in changing your thoughts, but in changing your relationship to your thoughts, not in stopping the mental narrator, but in recognizing that you are not that narrator. You are the one who can choose whether or not to believe what it's saying. The freedom that comes from recognizing your mind's deceptions isn't the freedom to control your thoughts. It's the freedom to stop being controlled by them. It's the difference between being swept away by a river and standing on the bank, watching the water flow. When you catch your mind in the act of storytelling, something profound shifts. That thought about how you embarrassed yourself last week, you start to see it as mental commentary, not historical fact. That prediction about tomorrow's meeting going terribly, you recognize it as anxiety-driven fiction, not inevitable destiny. That voice saying you're not capable of change, you hear it as old programming, not present truth. This doesn't mean your thoughts become powerless. They still carry information, still serve functions, still deserve attention, but they lose their authority to dictate your reality without question. They become suggestions instead of commands, possibilities instead of certainties. Most people spend their lives arguing with their thoughts, trying to convince themselves out of negative thinking, battling their own mental processes like they're fighting an enemy. But the mind isn't your enemy. It's just doing what it was designed to do, which is to create meaning, predict outcomes, and keep you safe. The problem isn't that it does this. The problem is that you've forgotten you have a choice about whether to believe what it produces. Think about dreams for a moment. When you're dreaming, the most bizarre scenarios feel completely normal. You accept flying as natural, conversations with deceased relatives as ordinary, impossible landscapes as perfectly reasonable. But the moment you wake up, you instantly recognize it was all mental construction. The emotions were real, the experience felt authentic, but you don't spend your morning trying to figure out how you actually flew or why your childhood home suddenly had 17 bedrooms. Your waking thoughts work the same way. They feel real in the moment. They carry emotional weight. They seem to describe actual conditions, but most of them are just dreams you're having with your eyes open. The difference is you haven't learned to wake up from them. And here's what nobody tells you about waking up from the mind's lies. Life doesn't become perfect. Problems don't disappear. Challenges don't evaporate. What changes is your relationship to uncertainty, to discomfort, to the unknown spaces where your mind used to frantically fill in blanks with fictional narratives. You start to become comfortable not knowing. You stop needing to have an explanation for every feeling, a prediction for every outcome, a story for every silence. You learn to exist in the gap between what you know and what you think you know. And in that gap, something remarkable happens. Reality has space to reveal itself without being immediately covered by mental interpretation. The person who doesn't text back is just someone who didn't text back. The job interview is just a conversation. The uncertain future is just uncertain, not catastrophic or wonderful or anything else until it actually unfolds. You stop living in a world of mental projections and start inhabiting the world that actually exists. This might sound simple, but it's revolutionary. Most people never experience reality directly. They experience their thoughts about reality, their stories about what's happening, their interpretations of events filtered through layers of assumption and projection. They live one step removed from their own life, constantly narrating instead of experiencing, constantly analyzing instead of simply being present to what is. But you can step out of that cycle. You can learn to distinguish between the map and the territory, between the story and the event, between what your mind says is happening and what is actually happening. And when you do, you discover something extraordinary. Life is much simpler and much more mysterious than your thoughts have been telling you. The mind that has been lying to you isn't broken. It doesn't need to be fixed or silenced or reprogrammed. It just needs to be seen clearly, understood for what it is, and given a different role in your life. Instead of being the authority on truth, it becomes a tool for processing information. Instead of being the director of your experience, it becomes one voice among many, offering its perspective, but not demanding automatic belief. This is how you reclaim your life from the stories that have been running it. Not by fighting them, not by replacing them with better stories, but by recognizing them as stories in the first place. And in that recognition, you find something that was always there, but hidden beneath layers of mental noise. you find yourself, not the self your mind has been describing, but the self that exists beyond description, beyond story, beyond the need for your own thoughts to tell you who you are. Your mind will keep creating stories. That's what minds do. But you no longer have to live inside those stories as if they were reality itself. You can step back, observe, and choose which thoughts deserve your attention and which ones you can simply let pass by, like clouds in an endless sky.